The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry.
Are y'all ready?
We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Are y'all ready? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. This is your boy, Alvin Glimpf, one of the co-hosts of this podcast, Aftergate. It is great to be here. Great to be doing this show as always. This is just a highlight of my week and appreciate the opportunity to have some of these great conversations with some of our alumni. But before we get into this episode's conversation, let me introduce my co-host, my homeboy running on 30 some odd years, summer of 87, my day one. What's the deal, homie? Mr. Herman Dubois. What's going on, folks?
Beautiful, bro. Everything's can't complain. You know, loving life in the Sunshine State in the mid 90s right now. It's
Oh yeah.
hot summer of Miami.
Yep.
Been a taxing week, but blessed week. Continued in the mural project with some young men, which was really gratifying, and just always looking forward to the opportunity to touch some lives and impact the next generation. And definitely get excited when we have guests on the show, especially guests that are new to our existence, because sometimes we
Yes.
have the fortune of interviewing people that we know, whether we went to school same time they were there or overlapped or before or after, and then those who we have never met. It just goes to show you how vast the AOC network is. So definitely excited about today's show.
Same here. Same here. Looking forward to a little vacationing later in the summer, but so far just been plugging away. Holiday weekend was good. Did my little cookout.
It was not no little cookout.
Oh
Okay,
no, okay.
when you're serving a couple hundred people, that's not a little
True that. That was
cookout.
2 whole briskets, 9 slabs of ribs, 8 whole chickens is what we cooked that morning for. You're right, it was a couple of hundred people. So that was my first actual being hired out opportunity as a grill master, and actually got a gig coming out of it from one of the people who was attending. So um, yeah, they had no idea who they was hiring, man. I felt like,
So
you
for
know,
those of you who don't know, you might want to know.
you might want to check it out, right? It was like
Right.
LeBron James walked into a little pickup game, and they had no idea who was in the
Right.
But that's what it is. That's what it is. So, but all is good, man. All is good. So, for those who don't know, not just about that, Al can get it in on the grill, but for don't to know what Aftergate is all about, because you're right, we do have a brother who we just meeting, and so we hope that as we are connecting with him, we'll also connect with his network, which means some of his people might not have heard of Aftergate. So, Aftergate is a weekly podcast where we are trying to interview, lift up, amplify some of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color who have graduated from Colgate University. So, it's an exciting part of our life. We're looking forward to today's conversation. And with that being said, if it's all right with you, Mr. Dubois, can we bring in this week's guest?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Aftergate Network listeners, it is our pleasure to welcome to the show officially Mr. Elvis Alves, class of 2002.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
I'm okay. A bit tired. Long day. It's the summer, but I'm still teaching. So um,
Okay,
it was a long day, but a good day nevertheless.
that's what's up. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. And so, as Jerry hinted at, we have not met before.
Right.
We always like to set as part of our context for our listeners, let them know, is this somebody that we know, we went to school with, we've met over the years, or is this, in this case, somebody that we are getting to know live and direct the same way they are? So in this case, this is somebody we're meeting here. So looking forward to it, sir.
Same here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So class of 2002, you graduated high school 1998.
Exactly. 1998.
Okay, okay. So, um, give us a sense of, well, first, you graduated from high school where? Where are you from?
Oh, well, at the time I was living in Brooklyn, New York, but I commuted to Harlem, New York. So I graduated from a public high school, A. Philip Randolph High School.
Wow.
Time out. Time out.
Wow, wow, wow.
Time
So,
out. Hit the
so,
brakes. Hit the brakes. Hold up.
so hold on,
He's
hold
a
up.
fellow Randolph Cougar.
All
I'm an
right,
alumni of A. Philip Randolph. Stop, stop, stop.
before you
Wait,
just
wait,
take it
wait.
over, before you just take it over with the A. Philip Randall stuff, let me just get a little Brooklyn love. I'm born in Brooklyn, so let me just, Kingston Avenue, Crown Heights. Let me
Yeah.
just shout that out, and then I'll turn the mic over
Uh,
to the A. Philip Randolph alums.
Yes.
let's start. Let's start. What part of Brooklyn?
Bedford Stuyvesant.
Yes.
Best Side. Okay, do it that Best Side. Okay, so Randolph. Wow. Oh wow. That's dope. Hey, I've been there. We've been unofficially, declaring. And I was having a conversation with brother Dementia Reed, who was down here in Miami with his family visiting, and we had a chance to connect. And he didn't know I went to A. Philip Randolph. So he's going off at the mouth about all these other schools, and I'm like, I think that if we were to put a wager, I think Randolph could claim the most number of students that have gone to Colgate from one particular school. So I already know this is a dynamic brother because not only did he go to Colgate, but he went to Randolph. So okay, wait, so when you were there, who was principal?
You know what? I know it was Miss. I believe it was Miss McFarland.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. And so how did you hear about Randolph coming from Brooklyn?
Well, um, my closest school was Boys and Girls, and at the time it wasn't my first choice. So I did some research, and it was said of Randolph that, if you didn't get into, say, like Brooklyn Tech or Bronx Science, Randolph would be one of the
Yeah.
next to go. And so I chose to commute. It took me around an hour and a half, 2 hours each way to commute. But I think it was a good decision, and I had a good education, and that's it.
There it is. I did the same commute, except I was coming from the North Bronx down into Harlem. So you already know. All right. So now we get to
Okay.
Colgate.
So, my wife, Colgate couple, she's a Philip Randolph alum as well. Actually commuted from Laurelton, Queens, back and forth. So, I'll make sure she's aware we interviewed a Philip Randolph alum. I'm sure that kind of cool for her as well. So let's go back to that time before Colgate, um, mid 90s. Give us a sense of what life is like for you. Give us a sense of what you remember about the world in general so that we can kind of set the context of what the world is like, what life is like as you are coming and entering into Colgate.
Sure. I think I should start by saying I immigrated with my family to Brooklyn when I was 9. We moved from Guyana, and so that was 1988. And I started elementary school and middle and then high school. In terms of what I remember, Bed-Stuy obviously was not gentrified as it is currently. um, I was surrounded by poverty, and that was also sort of the height of the crack um, epidemic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, um, my parents and others were very strict in terms of steering myself and siblings into taking our education seriously. And so even though we were surrounded by these vices, we had strong people within our family and friends circles to sort of shepherd us into staying
Mm.
away from devices and focusing on school. Hip hop was big. That was um, the time of like Wu-Tang Clan, Biggie Smalls, Jay-Z, and so myself and my classmates, we were into rap, basketball as
Mm.
well, but our priority definitely was education and doing well in school and moving forward with our education.
Fantastic. So, how did you happen to hear about Colgate? What's your how
Yeah,
you got the Colgate story?
yeah. So I, I I mentioned sort of using school as an avenue to success. I went to a Saturday program. Actually, it was a after school and a Saturday program called the Upward Bound.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was one of many programs at the time that worked with talented, smart inner city kids like myself to give us extra help after school and on Saturdays. And so the program that I was part of, it was run at City College, which is
Mm.
across the street from Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not only go to school Monday through Friday, I commuted to Harlem on Saturdays as well. And so one of the counselors there introduced Colgate to me. And
Mm.
this was shortly after I took my SATs. And I knew I wanted to stay in New York State, not necessarily New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, why don't you look at Colgate? And so um, Colgate, I believe I reached out but I do remember receiving um, a brochure from Colgate, and eventually it became one of my number one choices in terms of where to attend school. And and so that was a sort of a brief story of how I was introduced to Colgate through Upward Bound.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
If I can interject another parallel, I was an upward bound student at Columbia University, although they didn't necessarily introduce me to Colgate. It was a counselor at A. Philip Randolph that did. When I was first, Colgate was first mentioned, I then went to the staff at Upward Bound and said, what do you know about Colgate? And they were like, what do you know about Colgate? And then the conversation continued. So nice to see that I have another Upward Bound
Yeah.
alum. And then I actually became director of Upward Bound at that same program years later. So Upward Bound Trio, shout out to Trio programs around the country, federally funded Department of Ed, big love, big shouts.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're kind of familiar with the demographics of Hey Philip Randolph, the demographics of Bed-Stuy at the time. So, what was the transition like as
Mhm.
you arrived to Colgate? What do you remember about that initial
Yeah.
transition?
Yeah. Well, I went to schools prior to Colgate where the schools were predominantly um, Latino and Black students.
Mm-hmm.
Randolph didn't have any white students at all. So when I came to Colgate, it was shocking, surprising that there were so many few students that looked like me. But in some ways, I was aware of that because I did my research before. Um, and at the same time, I had an innate confidence that I belong there, that I worked hard, and I know that I can succeed as any of my other classmates. So even though it was surprising, shocking, as I said, to be one of few Black students, I knew I belonged at Colgate, and that was a good feeling in itself.
Gotcha. Where did you live, stay dorm wise, like your first year, second year?
Yeah, I was up the hill, East Hall.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
and then during my second year, I became a resident advisor
Mm-hmm.
in Curtis. And then I traveled to Manchester, England with Professor Darby in my junior year, first half of my junior year. And then I lived in, I believe it's not West Hall, but it was one of the dorms closest to the main cafeteria there.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed there for 2 years. So I lived up the hill all 4 years, working as a resident advisor, and then one of the main, I forgot the name of it, like it's like a
Frank.
level above the resident advisor.
Oh, okay.
So I oversaw one of the dorms.
Right.
Gotcha.
Question for you: were you so you were you not involved in the OUS program?
I was involved in OUS, so I came like what 5 or 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
and Lee was one of the leaders, and
Lawrence.
yeah,
Lawrence,
Lee
yeah.
Evans, Lee
Yeah,
Evans,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So he's a good guy, and I remember taking economics with Lee,
Mm-hmm.
and thought I would be a economics major. So I definitely took advantage of OUS, and I participated while I was at Colgate.
So when you look at some of your time on campus, like what do you look back at as things that you are proud of, highlight some of your accomplishments? What do you reflect on when you think about your 4 years as good things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think one of my appreciations is that I built on that confidence that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I learned about myself, that I really love learning and invest in myself in the process of being a critical thinker, a good writer, and to reflect in the process of learning, and seeing how and what I was learning connect to real life situations, and in that way trying to find solutions to some of the issues that were close and dear to me. And I think maybe we can eventually have a conversation about this, but that helped me become more not just aware, but um, sort of led me to my life as a seminarian after Colgate and studying at Princeton Seminary as well. So there was this passion to put into practice some of the ideas that I was learning at Colgate. Um, and I also appreciated time away from New York City. I mentioned that New York wasn't the best of places at the time
Mm-hmm.
due to crime, drugs, and other vices. And I knew I did not want to stay in the confines of the city, and to experience fresh air, to be among trees and not sort of think about crimes necessarily. That was a bit of a reprieve for me, and I was grateful for that. Thirdly, building relationship with people, um, not just classmates, but also professors that I
Mm-hmm.
met there. I studied with Professor Harvey Sindima.
Yes.
I mentioned Darby as one of the early influencers in terms of my writing. So studying with classmates, and also with people who invested time and energy into me becoming the type of person that I am. I'm grateful for these things as well.
What did you
Does that
major
mean
in?
you? Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. What
How,
did I major in?
yeah,
I was a religion major.
so
Yeah.
was I. So was I.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So when you think of, your classes and you think of non-academic experiences, just curious, were you engaged in any extracurricular activities? What was like in the non-academic realm for you at Colgate?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm smiling because I think I was one of the few non-athletes Black males on campus.
Mm,
Uh, so I felt I missed out on the camaraderie of being on a sports team. And so in terms of non-academics, I um, I was involved in like the Black Students Association or
mhm,
Brothers,
mhm,
um, but at this like socially, it was a bit awkward because I felt and I still feel this that Colgate wasn't necessarily the best place for me socially. Academically, yes, but I wasn't involved in the frats. I wasn't involved in any of the sports teams, and so what what do I do, right? Socially, other than go to certain club meetings,
mhm.
and when the opportunity presented itself, leave campus to come home on breaks. So socially, it wasn't necessarily the best for me, but academically, definitely yes.
And then let's not forget that being an RA is also quite consuming. Not sure
Yes,
where your RA experiences were, but I went to the RA experience training, although I never RA'd anywhere. One of the things I remember them often, referencing was, remember you're a student first and an RA second, and so the
Mm.
ability to manage your responsibilities both academically and I guess in the RA role. So you mentioned being an RA for several of the years, as well as then being, I think it was an HR
sure, yes.
resident, and so that in and of itself would be consuming. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I did that for 3 years. You're correct. Yeah.
So as I was just reflecting, you were there during the change from 1999 to 2000, right? So I'm just curious, what do you remember? Doesn't necessarily have to be the millennium or Y2K, but just is there anything that kind of stand out in terms of major incidents or just different tensions, or just kind of curious, what was the campus like during those years, if you can remember anything like that?
Yeah. I do remember, students, especially students of color, protesting
Hmm.
and calling for more presence of students that look like us
Mm-hmm.
and teachers as well. There was a sit-in, I remember,
Mm-hmm.
around that time as well. Um, and and I think also, if I remember correctly, one or two incidents where graffiti graffiti was written on dorms or lecture halls that were racist in nature. Um, so so it wasn't a calm campus.
Yeah.
There was tension there as well. And I'm not too sure, but I got the sense that the administration at the time did not necessarily know what to do. And students had some ideas. I'm not sure before I left that the ideas were taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, it was a time where I felt change was in the air, but needed to be done by adults on campus, because the students were voicing these ideas and calls, but I didn't get a sense that they were necessarily listened to.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we're gonna take a pause right there and opportunity to give some love to our sponsor, and then we're gonna come back on the back end and finish up this conversation with Elvis. So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Before we jump into continuing this conversation, let me make sure we thank our sponsor, Hope Murals. We greatly appreciate all that they do to expose our youth to urban arts and helping them become more independent thinkers and building their character and just making them more civically engaged and just better people. So shout out to Hope Murals. Check out what they do at hopemurals.org. Raise more awareness about their activities because they are just blowing it up this year. So show them some love, even make a donation if you can. So check them out at Hope Murals on all types of social media platforms. So big up to Hope Murals. If you are interested in being a sponsor, all you got to do is hit us up at aftergatepodcast@gmail.com and we will work something out with you. Make sure you also show some love to our network, the Defy Life Network at www.godefylife.com. You can find more interesting and empowering, relevant written content on their site. Also, check out their podcast hub. You got defylifepods.com. You can find more dope podcasts, just like Aftergate at their podcast hub. So show them some love. So let's jump back into the conversation. And as always, we like to bring a question to our guests that doesn't have, might not have anything to do with what they're doing, could be current events. In this particular instance, it is something that is near and dear to my heart, the New York Knickerbockers, the
Yeah.
Knicks. Yes. So, brother Elvis, the Knicks have been very um, active. They have made some free agent moves. They have also been kind of also fluttering, like they've been up and down over the last decade or so. So I'm curious to know someone who lives in New York. I'm just someone following them down here in Atlanta. Curious to know someone who's on the ground. What's your thoughts on the New York Knicks?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I'm thinking you asked me a question earlier about how New York City was like in the 90s. And the Knicks definitely played an important role in classifying New York as a sports town. And so they were gritty, they were hardworking. We had Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason, and at the helm we had Pat Riley as a coach. And so since then I was a fan of the Knicks, and I think moving forward we will definitely revamp our glory days by choosing or acquiring better players. There's always hope for New York, so there's always hope for the Knicks.
That's what's up. I'm curious, especially being in Brooklyn. A lot of Brooklynites who were Knick fans jumped ship when the Nets came to Brooklyn.
Mhm.
So just someone who is a Knick fan, but also reps Brooklyn. I'm
Yeah.
curious how did that play out with you when the Nets came into Brooklyn?
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because I'm not sure if this has been reported widely. A lot of Brooklynites were not big fans of the Nets moving to Brooklyn because what the government did was raise a lot of houses in that neighborhood
Mm,
to build that stadium.
mm.
And some of us, including myself, don't think that was right. But also aesthetically, the stadium is not really good to look at. So so even though the Nets are a better team in the NBA, not everyone in Brooklyn welcomed them for those reasons. And there was one, there are certain policies as well. I remember reading about one being that if you had tattoos, they wouldn't hire you to work at the stadium. And young black and brown people with tattoos were discriminated against by the Nets.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of politics behind the Nets moving to Brooklyn. And so I was not a fan of that, and still am not. And so that's sort of a long answer to your question.
Well, hopefully my brother Don is listening. He was one of them Nick fans who uh,
I'm sure.
turned traitor, jumped ship, became a Net fan. So hopefully he's listening and understand that all Brooklyn did not jump over to the Nets. And I appreciate your answers.
Sure.
So that's what's up. What you got, Jerry?
All right, so as we bring it back to Colgate, take us through sort of memory lane, from graduating and to where you're at now, the highs, the lows. You know, were you one of those seniors that they kind of knew the direction you wanted to go in, or was it just you
Mhm.
know escape from Colgate in Hamilton, New York, and I'll figure it out when I get back to New York? Or was what happened then, and bring us current?
Yeah, I guess I was grateful. I had a high sense of gratitude because I mentioned that I came here as an immigrant, and I was the first in my family to graduate from school, from college. And so walking across that stage was a very important mark, not just in my own life, but in my family's life. And so I was grateful. Um, I knew I wanted to continue studying, and so I went straight to seminary, and I studied for 3 years at Princeton Theological Seminary, and graduated in '05 with a Master of Divinity. So I guess to stay with the Colgate question, um, I want to just reiterate that I was grateful to graduate, and I knew that my learning would continue, and it did at Princeton Seminary.
So then you finish Princeton Seminary, and where do you go with that after '05?
Yeah, I worked for 2 years at a nonprofit back in New York. And then in 2007, I moved to Providence, Rhode Island for my first teaching job at a Quaker school. And so after some years in Providence, I came back to New York and worked as a hospital chaplain, and for about 4 years at a hospital in Brooklyn, my hometown. And then I moved to Pennsylvania and taught at another Quaker school. And now I'm back in New York and teaching at a private school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Um, and also, while I'm teaching, I'm writing because I'm a published poet as well. And so I've published 3 books of poetry
Mm.
and 2 chapbooks. So total of 5 books so far.
Awesome,
Teaching. What are
awesome.
you teaching?
Oh, currently I teach English. So I'm an English teacher, and prior to that, I taught religion at the Quaker schools.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Um,
Talk a
is
little bit about
there?
your word, your world of poetry. I'm so in the early years of my post Colgate life, I was involved a little bit in that underground spoken word movement. New York City's famous for several locations. One in particular, New York and Poets Cafe, was a place I visited often, and a
Yes.
very very close friend of mine it just became the executive director there. So interested in learning how poetry came into your world.
Yeah. Well, I've also participated at events and read at New Rican Cafe. I'm sure you and I would probably have some of the same poet friends, because in some ways, Black and Brown poets in New York, we tend to form our own communities, and especially prior to the pandemic, we would support each other by going to read-ins and purchasing each other books and whatnot. But to answer your question, I've always written poetry. I remember
Hmm.
when I was in the sixth grade, my teacher, Miss Hall, um, she put one of my poems on the door of the classroom. And so people would stop by and read my poem. And that impressed me because I created something that would stop people in their tracks, right? And so, literally speaking, and so from a young age, I've written poems, read poetry as well. Um, During Colgate, I took writing classes. I mentioned being an avid reader, and I believe writing um, theological papers in seminary as well helped me become a better writer. But I definitely became more focused in terms of honing my skills as a writer around the time I finished seminary in 2005, 2006.
Nice, nice, nice. You mentioned you went on a what do you call it? Studied abroad.
I
I'm
did, yes.
I'm just curious, what was that like? How did it impact you in terms of once you came back and kind of looking back?
Yeah, I was in Manchester during my first half of junior year, and it was it was fun. It was interesting. Um, I was studying at the University of Manchester, and I was one of the younger students. Was like one of it was the first time that I studied with adult students, like people 40, 50 years
Hmm.
old. And I remember um, I was in the library, and one of the guys came to me. He was like 20 years or so older than I am at the than I was at the time, and he said to me, "Do you think what the professor said was right?" Like he wanted my opinion as sort of like an expert on the topic, and and that never necessarily happened to me at Colgate. Like someone like older and a student looked at me as equal to a professor or knowing as much as a professor, and so that was one of many um, events that happened to me as a traveler and how I was viewed that solidify or made me think that I had something to offer to the world, right? And so traveling definitely helped with that. And as you know, Guyana was colonized by the British, unfortunately.
Hmm.
And I visited family members who I've only heard about,
Mm.
but now I was able to see and have dinner with them, and and that in itself was a beautiful family reunion. And they lived in London, so I spent a lot of time in London with my family.
Dope. So when you look back, when we like to ask people a question that kind of gets a sense of perspective. So when you look back at Elvis coming into Colgate, are there things that you wish you knew and might have advised that Elvis? And then conversely, the Elvis that was graduating Colgate, are there words of wisdom that you would have shared with that Elvis as well?
Hmm. To be honest, you know, I was aware throughout my Colgate years that I wasn't as wealthy as the white students. And so I would tell the Elvis coming into Colgate not to be bothered by that.
Mm,
And in some ways, I was, and in some ways, I was not bothered. But yes, still, I was aware of it, right?
mhm,
So sort of tell myself that even though you're in a predominantly wealthy institution, don't let not having as much as your classmates be something to make you feel sad or disappointed, um, because your worth has to do with how you see yourself,
mm,
right? And there are a lot of wealthy people who have money but have low self-esteem or confidence. So not to focus as much on wealth. And I think your second question was after leaving Colgate.
right. When you graduate, what would be some of the words of wisdom you might offer to that Elvis?
Well, I mentioned I was I was grateful and I was swimming in gratitude. So continue swimming in that gratitude,
Mm,
because seminary sort of like smacked me in the face as well. And you know, um, it's one of the in terms of academics is one of the toughest seminaries in the world,
mhm,
right? And so in some ways Colgate prepared me for that academically, but at the same time I still had to work hard, and I still encountered this lack of diversity, some of the same issues
mhm, mhm.
that I face at Colgate. So telling myself to continue to be grateful for the opportunity to study and to better myself, and try to better my family and others that I encounter as well. So this notion of being grateful for what I have, um, is something that I would tell myself.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Next is hey, really an opportunity for you to promote and share with our Aftergate community any initiative, names of your books, how to access your poetry, but really just a pure platform for you to promote whatever you would like to promote.
All right, so I just want to say thank you for having me on and having this conversation. In some ways, it was quite spontaneous, and I like the nature of it. So thank you, and even the connections with Herman through Upward Bound, your wife Alvin, who also went to Randolph.
Hmm.
So there's this organic connection that I appreciate. In terms of my book, I mentioned I have written three full-length poetry and and two chapbooks. My latest book was actually published in Ireland through Salmon Poetry Press,
Wow.
and you can find my books at your local bookstores. Um, Definitely by going to the publishers' websites as well. I mentioned Salmon Poetry. You can go on Amazon as well. My books are there. Um, and, you know, hopefully, if you're local here in New York, I'll do some local readings. You can come out this end of the month, the 25th to be exact. I'm reading at Green Lights Bookstore in Flatbush. So I'll be
Nice.
signing my latest book, Blackfish. So if you want, you can find me, and thank you for supporting me.
Definitely share if you got any type of flyer or anything like that. If you can get it to us, I'll definitely get it to some folks I know in New York. Um, Originally from New York, so I still have family and cousins, and a couple of
And
them
to
are into
promote
poetry.
it, AOC has an active platform, social media platform that they're always plugging AOC around the country who follow that might be their only way that they know what other alum are doing. And so I highly encourage you to get that to us so we can get that in those hands if you're not already connected to other ALC folks.
All right, thank you. I'll definitely send you some flyers and other information. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have you
you.
been back on campus? Have you been back to campus since you graduated?
Yeah, I returned 2011 for a reunion. It wasn't.
We were there.
It,
Well, maybe I don't know. We were there 2011 for a reunion.
11? No, actually, it was 2014 because it was right before I moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So 2014, and I read at Colgate Bookstore.
Awesome. Yeah, they do show love to authors at the bookstore when you return for reunions. So that's a good thing. So hopefully, this will be a way to continue to increase your engagement. That is part of why we're doing this as well, to not only connect alums, share, document, promote, but also we are using this as a opportunity to engage alums in a way that hopefully they want to re-engage with alumni of color, as well as the institution and students, just as a way to give back and continue keeping this thing as strong as possible. So very much encourage that and enjoy this conversation with you, my brother.
Thank you. I'll definitely give back, and I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yes, sir. So on that note, this has been another episode of Aftergate Season 2. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our listeners. As always, Aftergate is powered by the Defy Life Network. So make sure you check us out in future episodes on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Many more dope episodes to follow. And remember, the Colgate of your day is not the Colgate of today. And it's certainly not the Colgate of the future. Not if we have anything to do with it. So, peace, family.
Shh. You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy Life.